West Virginia has picked up a star wide receiver out of the transfer portal by the name of Devin Carter. What kind of player is Devin Carter? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a guest today that's going to tell us just that. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and let me serve you up this shot of top shelf college football content. What is going on, Mountaineer Nation and college football fans? This is Coos, and welcome into another edition of Coos' Corner. Pull that chair up, and today I've got a double shot of top shelf content for you because I'm bringing on a special guest who has seen Devin Carter play up close and personal, Mr. Macon Adams. How you doing, Macon?
Doing pretty good, Coos. How you doing?
Doing great, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on and chat college football with me a little bit.
Oh, absolutely, man. That's just a great opportunity to talk about sports. And obviously, I love my Wolfpack, but I'm glad you guys got a great receiver for us. Even though he's transferred out of our program, he's going to the Mountaineers. That's great for y'all.
First off, before we dive in, tell my listeners where they can find you at, what about your podcast and all that.
Yep. So our podcast is called Tuffy Talk. Tuffy is a nickname for our mascot. You see behind me, it's also Mr. Wolf. But we are a podcast, and we kind of brand ourselves as truly being NC State fans. We don't, not your typical media. We call our NC State fans talking state stuff. It's kind of how we go about talking about it. And honestly, it's a big part of our interest. Is just, we love talking it, and we thought, we could put this on. We could start doing a podcast, and particularly something you could watch rather than listen to. But you can find us at on Twitter at Tuffy Talk Now. You can find us on YouTube, of course, and Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all those places there. So, that's where you can find us at.
Awesome. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I've got the Twitter handle scrolling at the bottom of the screen at Tuffy Talk Now. I've got my Twitter handle at Coos206. I'll put links to Tuffy Talk in the description box and all that. And for those of you listening on podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, all of them, it's at Coos206, at COUZ206 is mine, and his is at Tuffy Talk Now, at TUFFYTALKNOW. So, with that being said, we've got all that out of the way. Let's dive in. What kind of player is West Virginia fans getting in Devin Carter?
So Devin is, he is a player who's a big body receiver. He is, you typically could see him being a deep threat, but I kind of view him almost as like he kind of has a little bit of a possession receiver at times, but I kind of think him as clutch as well. He has that gene in him, I would say. He has the ability to make those kinds of plays. NC State in 2022 had a year at the quarterback position that was very tumultuous. They got down to their QB4. That's just about as low as you can get on a football roster for, struggling at the quarterback position. So, I don't know if Devin Carter really gelled at times with having so much change over the quarterback position. It wasn't his best year, obviously. He was hurt a little bit, but he did play in 9 games. So that's, just a little bit of the time he was out. Devin has been slightly at times inconsistent, I would say. I think it's something to me. I think when I watch him, is it a want to kind of thing? But when he wants to, he can be 100+ yard receiver, 9-10 receptions a game if he really wanted to, even more than that. He seemed to be a guy you like going to on third downs. You go back and watch. He can make some big plays, man. I think he's 6'4". I can't remember how tall he is. But he's a big dude, big body guy. I think he's 210, his weight. And you go back and watch a UNC game from this past season. First drive of that game. For the Mountaineer fans who want to go watch, our QB4 started that game, and first play of the game, or first drive of the game, he takes a shot to Devin Carter, and Devin Carter almost stiff arms muscles the defender, the cornerback for UNC, into the end zone. It was like a man on top of this guy just body him down the field. And you can see he's not slow. He can move. He's maybe not the quickest guy,
Right.
but he just has made some pretty big plays. And I think his most historic play, or the play fans at State won't forget, is you go back to last year against Clemson. State had not been Clemson in Raleigh, and I want to say about 10 years. And it was double overtime, and Devin Leary, our quarterback then, who also has transferred out because he kind of got injured and a few different factors there. He takes a shot at Devin Carter in the right back corner of the end zone, and basically in double coverage. You got to go back and watch that clip, man. He kind of contorts his body in a way that only he could have caught in that moment, and it was special, man. It was a special receiving catch. I mean, Devin Leary had to put it there, but Devin Carter's ability to make catches like that in big moments is probably what I think I would attribute to him the most. He has that gene in him. It's just the question of when does he want to, turn it on or not. And I think some of that has to do with QB chemistry there.
Yeah.
But man, he can make plays. He can make, the 10 and out kind of receiving plays. The fade routes. He can kind of make those kind of catches. He's a good receiver, man. I mean, State fans would love to have seen him stay another year. But in this world of NIL and all that kind of thing, and getting more opportunities, especially I think in his last year now. This will be he'll have 1 year to play for y'all. It's a good get for Mountaineers, good for West Virginia. I mean, State fans would love to have had him, but he's a really good player as a person. He definitely seems like a team leader kind of guy. He wants to be. He doesn't shy away from that kind of role. He's from Clayton, North Carolina, which I think it's Clayton, which is not too far down the road from Raleigh. Wasn't a big time recruit necessarily. Wasn't a big star kind of recruit. I think he was a 3-star guy, but very quickly State fans, liked him. He progressed through his years at State, and then again, like this past season had its own reasons why he didn't have necessarily the best stats. But I don't think that is the whole story of Devin Carter for West Virginia fans. So,
right.
Good receiver.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Great stuff. And I did go back and watch some of those highlights you talked about. I encourage our listeners and those watching to go check it out as well. You can find his clips pretty much anywhere you want on YouTube. But what stood out to me was his ability to go up and high point the football, his ability to catch in traffic, and do the things that a receiver, a 6'2", 6'3" receiver should be able to do. He does it, and he's physical. The play you talked about him stiff arming the guy. He can break tackles. I mean, he's a strong runner.
Yep.
And he's actually, what's funny is the guy he's replacing, Bryce Ford Wheaton, who I found out later also happens to be friends with Devin Carter.
Oh, really?
Ironically, and tried to push him to come into Morgantown. Actually, I think they are actually really, really similar. They have the same body type, same style. Bryce Ford Wheaton was kind of that same type of receiver.
Right.
The one thing Devin, I think, has done better than Bryce over time is he's caught the ball better. Bryce I think he's credited with like 18 drops in his career, whereas Devin's only been credited with about 12, I think. So hopefully we're getting a more sure-handed guy in that regard. But as far as athletically, they're really, really similar. And they even play the same position. He's going to play that wide receiver position that Bryce played. So,
Devin's like, he's always been that outside kind of receiver. So again, don't expect him to be a quick twitch kind of guy, not like a slot,
right?
But big body, takes up a lot of space, kind of sucks the ball into him when he catches it, but his hands are soft at the same time. Can go up and get it. Big play receiver. I kind of come back to, I do think he can make some pretty clutch plays. It's just better when he wants to. And he kind of hovered for the last 3 years around like the 30 receptions, 500 yards a season kind of game. So I'm just kind of looking at stats here for us, but he's a great get for West Virginia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we needed it because our wide receiver room was depleted. We lost Bryce Ford Wheaton and Sam James both to graduation. We had our next 2 top receivers, Caden Prater and Reese Smith, go to the portal. So those guys were probably 80% of our production,
Mm.
if not more,
Yeah.
as far as the wide receiver position goes. So we needed bodies, and we needed quality bodies, and I think we got one in him. We also picked up one out of Kent State, a slot receiver named Jashawn Polk,
Okay.
he's more of a quick twitch kid. But and there's still, there's more guys to go get. They're still on the hunt for some good receivers too.
Right.
Add one or two more, but um, what would you say about his route running ability? Is he a good route runner in your opinion?
Yeah, I think he. I think there's moments. I think there's ways he can improve. I haven't really. I don't remember studied ton about that, but I think that's a fair topic for him. Again, I think he's not gonna be because of his size. He's not as quick as a slot guy coming back to the ball or making those sharpest cuts. He kind of seems to kind of glide through
Mm-hmm.
his movements. But his strides are so long that it's hard for him to. And he's such big. He kind of takes a second, maybe more, to kind of collect himself and come back to the ball or adjust.
Yeah.
But he's I think that's where he makes up for it with his size, his wingspan, his ability to go up and get a football. So he kind of takes up a lot of space around him when he's out there.
Right. Good deal, man. Well, talking to you has got me, even more excited about this guy, or young man, I should say. I don't like
Yeah.
calling them kids at this point in their career. I mean, he's been playing. I think this will be his 6th year, if I'm not mistaken. So,
When he gets to West Virginia, it'll be 6 years, I think.
yeah. So I don't want to call him a kid. He's 22, 23 years old at this point, if not 24. I don't know,
Right.
but so he's probably, he's a grown man for
Right. No, I
for
hear you.
all intents and purposes. But let's switch gears a minute, man, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We've got to talk about our favorite defensive coordinator for a minute. What do North Carolina State fans think about Tony Gibson as a defensive coordinator?
Man, State fans love that guy. They he to me, when the word I kind of coming back to Tony Gibson, he's got this swagger about him, man. He's
Yeah.
got this vibe. He's kind of funny. He's always got chew in his mouth. He's always on some Chewbacca.
Yeah.
And someone commented on him, I think it was, and asked him, "Hey man, what's your choice, your brand of choice?" And he said, "I think it's Copenhagen or something like that, or Copenhagen." But
Yeah.
he just kind of has this vibe about him. And if you know State culture, State is a blue collar school. They are.
Right.
I think there's a quote from Dave Doran that's pretty. When I think back in 2014 or so, when he beat UNC first time, he said, "This is a hands in the dirt, work ethic, blue collar school. It's built by hard and tough people, and that's what this football team will be." And I feel like Tony Gibson just further is an extension of that. He kind of comes across like this hard, tough guy, and he runs that 3-3-5 scheme. And man, the fact that he knows and the recruiting staff know how to bring in the guys that meet that need and fit the scheme. I mean, the guys play, especially the secondary. They play like dogs, man. They
Yeah.
are tough. They I think kind of take on his personality. And, obviously, when you're shutting down teams, I know this defense was the only defense in the country this year that did not allow a team to score more than 30 points on them the whole season.
Wow.
So they're the only team to do that. Not Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan, none of those schools. It was NC State who did that. And we weren't playing chumps either. I mean, UNC had a Heisman contender, potentially thought, with Drake May. You had Clemson, who's always pretty strong. So you got some teams in there that are pretty good. Wake Forest has been pretty
Right.
respectable lately.
Right.
So yeah, Tony Gibson was great. I know they just re-upped him on his contract too, and he's now the highest paid defensive coordinator in the ACC. So he's the new Brent Venables, if you will. But
Yeah.
man, I don't think people like playing State defensively. I don't think they look forward to it. I think if State could only get some more pressures on the defensive line, because you're getting your pressure from your linebackers, right? In that 3-3-5 scheme, that puts the emphasis more on the talent that you have there, which State had. People arguably would say the best linebacking core in the country. It's in the discussion at the very least. When you had Peyton Wilson, Drake Thomas, and Isaiah Moore as your starting three, all those guys are going to get drafted at some point.
Right.
But if State could get more pressure in the defensive line in that regard, I think it'd be scary. I think they did to a degree. They started to because your ends aren't as long and lean. They're more kind of like you get a little more size on them. They're kind of like a pseudo defensive tackle, but they kind of hold the edge there.
Mhm.
It kind of comes across your safeties, your corners, your nickels, and Tony Gibson's also brought a lot of good assistant coaches to help him play that scheme, but he every time you see guys flying in the ball, making plays. I think they were second in the ACC, if not first, in interceptions this season. Just a lot of categories State was really good in defensively, and honestly, it all comes back to Tony Gibson at this point. I know Dave Doran is a defensive-minded coach. I mean, he used to coach linebackers himself, but Tony Gibson just as State fans, defense wins championships. That's
Right.
the expression. And State was like, you got to find a way to keep it. In fact, State fans thought Tony Gibson was going to get hired away. I mean, he as rightfully, he probably should. But
Yeah.
I'm just glad, honestly, that the donors and that the Wolfpack Club and the university were able to find a way financially to give him a reason to stay. And I don't know if it was he had to pay him arm and a leg, but it was, you made him the highest paid DC. So, I mean, that's something.
Yeah. Were there any rumblings that he was looking? Did he have any opportunities to be
It
a head
wasn't
coach anywhere?
anything. I don't think there was really much smoke there. I think it was more of there was some like talk like, oh man, he's done so well. And there's been so much hype around our defense that maybe he probably is going to get a look. You kind of hear up schools like I thought I heard one school that was like Charlotte that
Mhm.
might be interested in hiring him, or people thought, hey, West Virginia,
Mhm.
I'm not sure how many people like Neil Brown so much. There's some, controversy there. People,
Right.
like him, don't like him. Maybe they hire, if they did let him go, I bet you $10, they'd come looking at Tony Gibson. And so people were kind of maybe uh, slightly worried is the way to put it. They were kind of like, he could go somewhere and he would be
Yeah.
he's earned it. So I don't know if it was a whole lot of smoke, but it was like enough there. Like, well, hey, I mean, he's done a really good job and he'd be a good coach for, you know, a non-power fives team, or maybe even some of these power five schools like West
Mhm.
Virginia, or I'm trying to think, I don't know of a school that would be hiring similarly, but it just, there was not a lot
Right.
there, but some.
Right. Well, that's exactly. I mean, pretty much everything you just said about him is exactly how we feel. I mean, his guys will run through a brick wall for him.
Yeah.
He's a great motivator. He's a good recruiter. And he's got that, like you said, that blue collar mentality, which
Yep.
he being from West Virginia, it's kind of ingrained in him, right? And
Yep.
it's the way he's always coached, and his players just really gravitate to that, man. And he's a player's coach, but yet he also knows how to bring the best out of his guys.
Yeah, I would even add this too. Another word to kind of throw in there is between him and Coach Doran, and um, I think they've established a culture here
Yeah,
that's really something people want. I mean, heck, we just hired a new offensive coordinator, Robert and I, who was at Virginia for a few years, and we just got the transfer quarterback Brennan Armstrong. But long story short, came in. He said, I've seen the success his team's had, and I want to be there. I thought with um, Tony Gibson and Dave Doran that they had this motto called hard, tough together.
mhm,
And kind of going back to that hard nosed football team, the way we play, the way we tackle, the way we hit is going to, people are going to remember us when they
right,
play us. And so I just kind of, I love watching Tony Gibson talk. I love watching him, um, you know, there's like a documentary the ACC network did on NC State the preseason, because there's a lot of hype for NC State going into the
mhm,
preseason, and you see some clips of Tony Gibson. He again, like I kind of work too. He's got this swagger about him, like he like ain't nothing really going to bother him. We're
mhm,
going to take care of business, kind of thing, and I like that.
yeah, yeah. He
So
does. He does have some swagger. He's got a little bit of cockiness to him, but not enough to be.
yeah, I can kind of see what you're talking about
I mean,
there.
he's still humble. He's a humble guy,
Yeah,
but
maybe
he
it's
just has,
confident. Maybe it's the word's
yeah,
confidence
extremely
there.
confident. Yeah,
Yeah,
extremely confident in what he's doing,
yeah,
and in his guys too. And I think it bleeds over
yeah,
and helps them on the field.
exactly.
And he had the chances here. his name came up but while he was still here as
Sure.
DC under Holgerson,
Sure.
his name came up for some jobs for some group of 5 jobs, and he ended up getting a huge pay raise here too. So he went through
Yeah.
the exact same thing here. Then unfortunately, Holgerson ended up leaving. They didn't retain Gibby. He moved on, ended up at NC State. I mean, he's still done well for himself, absolutely. But hey, and they're like you and I were talking before the show. There's some rumblings that there are some people in Morgantown, in and around Morgantown, or at least uh, people that are some donors or whatnot that would love to have Gibby as our head coach if Neil Brown doesn't pan out, which
Yeah.
he probably only has a year to get it right. If that, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be pushing for Gibby to get that job. Whether he does or not, who knows? But here's one fan right here that would not mind. I would rather, I've always said they need to go out and get a guy who's got Power 5 head coaching experience if there's somebody available. But
Right.
if we're going to bring in somebody that doesn't have it, he's the guy that I would want.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking back here. They gave him a new 3-year contract. His deal ends through 2025, just to give you some context.
Mhm.
And he's going to get $1.25 million per year.
Wow, that's great.
So for him as an assistant, it's good. Obviously, being a head coach is better, but it wouldn't take a whole lot. Obviously, a head coaching job comes calling, especially at a school that he has a lot of history with and he loves. I feel like State fans know it's probably a matter of time before he gets hired away somewhere. So,
Yeah.
But at least it seems like, for now that he's going to be our coach next year. So I'm excited about
That's
that.
good. Yeah.
But yeah, he could. I think State fans would kind of cherish and like to see if he went back to West Virginia, was a head coach and had success. It'd be like kind of heartwarming. It's like, man, that's
Right.
that's kind of where he's from. So that's his thing, and
Right.
it'd be cool to see. So if that ever happens,
yeah.
great. So
And it's hard to fault anyone for ever enhancing their career and taking that next step, right? Regardless of if they take a lateral move, it's a little different. But
right.
Anytime they can take that step up, you always, especially if they go home, it's hard to fault anybody for going home.
Yeah.
Real quick, just to talk a little NC State here. I know there was you talked about there being a lot of hype for you guys going into the season, 2022 season. You guys finished the season 8-5 with a loss in the Dukes Mayo Bowl to Maryland, 16-12. Is there any were NC State fans disappointed in how the season went, or what was the general feeling around the fan base?
Yeah, I think it was a mixed bag, and you get to look at it through this, this lens here of State had a lot of injuries, specifically at the QB position. And they had, your starting quarterback was Devin Leary, who had a huge season the year before, right? I mean, he had 3,500 yards, I believe it was, and 35 touchdowns, and on five interceptions.
Yeah,
so he
wow.
he had a huge year, and people thought going into this season, I mean, heck, Devin Leary was the ACC preseason player of the year, and he gets into the game. I can't remember which game it was necessarily, but he got hurt relatively early on. It might have been the Boston College game after Clemson, and I think that's right. I can't remember exactly who he played there, but he got injured after the Clemson game somewhere along the way. And you then have to you brought in a backup quarterback who was a grad transfer from Charleston Southern named Jack Chambers. He had a nice stat line at Charleston Southern, but very quickly when you start seeing him play, it's like, man, this guy is he makes his success running the ball at the QB position. He's not showing really much with this throwing arm, but he did help us get the win against Florida State. So you got to win there. Kind of a comeback win. At some point on the way, you try. I think Jack Chambers. I can't remember if he was still struggling or he got hurt, but then you go to your QB3, who at that point is a true freshman. He got here in the spring. His name is MJ Morris. He comes in against Wake Forest or Virginia Tech, excuse me. Virginia Tech went up like 20 to 21 to 3, I think was 20 to 3 or something around there. And State came back in the third, fourth quarter and won the game with this guy through 3 touchdowns and a half. And
wow.
So you're like, okay, so I didn't expect to win that game. And then he kind of gets hurt. So then you're like, so now you're down to QB4, who's Ben Finley, whose brother of a former NC State quarterback, and he was a little bit of NFL quarterback, Ryan Finley.
Right.
He comes in the last couple games, and State did not win. I think the last game. I can't remember who it was. I want to say, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Louisville. We lost that game to Louisville, and but it was kind of a mixed bag there too. In that game, we get to UNC, and it's the first game this QB4 starts, Ben Finley, and came out and got that win. And against UNC again, you're going up against Drake May and all this hype around UNC football, and State somehow beats them with a QB4. And so State, did they have expectations for this year that were really high? Talking 10 wins, I think would not have been out of reach for this team at all. You could argue we got 10 wins last year too, with how they weighed that Holiday Bowl ended against UCLA, which we never got to play. So you have that expectation up there. You couldn't get that. Once you start getting QBs injured, you got to readjust, right? So there's that. But then you get way down on that list of injuries of quarterbacks. So then you're like, well, how much should I expect? Is bowl game a success? Is it not a success? And I really think, honestly, I think at the end of the season, particularly with beating UNC the way we did, honestly, embarrassing them. We embarrassed them. And you got to 8 wins. 8 wins is a whole lot better than 7 wins. And it just feels better. I don't know how to put it that way. I think State fans were satisfied to a degree. They were like, I'll take that. Like, I'll take it. Like, that's kind of how we felt about this season. It was like, okay, could have gone way worse. Could have been a 6-win season with, you're down to your QB4. You end up finding ways to win, and you did it in different ways. I mean, your kicker helps you win some games. A lot of 2 or 3 games, I think you could argue. Chris Dunn, who won the Lou Groza Award this year, he won you some games. You had a running quarterback with Jack Chambers come in and win you a game against Florida State. You had a true freshman who had basically not been on campus for 6 months, comes in and helps you win against Virginia Tech. You're down by almost 3 scores. And then you got a QB4, helps you on the road, go in and beat UNC. To me, the staff, like particularly on Dave Dorn and the OC there, Tim Beck, who's now hired away as the head coach at Coastal Carolina. It was kind of like, I don't really know how to feel. It's you kind of wish you had 10 wins because there was so much hype going into it. But when you're losing the quarterbacks, you got to adjust. And so I think it's more like, we'll take it. It was like, I'm happy to a degree. It's good. Satisfied. I don't feel so like, man, this is just the terrible outcome of the season. It's just, you don't feel super disappointed, but you do think.
So you don't feel like West Virginia fans?
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know. We've had a lot of disappointing seasons. That hasn't honestly happened a ton recently for NC State. We had the one year we had a lot of injuries in 2019, I think when it was. But it's kind of like, man, the way we won the season. I don't know how many schools in the entire country had to go through 4 quarterbacks, and if they did, or even 3, and if they did they really get 8 wins? And
I mean, a lot of teams, if you get down to their 4th quarterback, you're down to your walk-ons at that point.
Right. So
you know what I mean? In a lot of cases.
Yeah. So I think at the bottom line, the ultimate takeaway is, okay, we kind of surpassed expectations that we had to adjust to based on the circumstances. So it's this weird season of, when we look back on it, I think State fans are kind of proud of how it ended. It's like, we didn't give up. We kept fighting. We found ways to still get wins. An 8-win season is still respectable, and not, it's not ACC championship kind of level. But I mean, what are you going to say to 4 quarterbacks?
Exactly.
Play? So,
yep, I hear you, man. Well, that's a pretty good outlook to have, in my opinion, as far as based on what you guys went through. And speaking of offensive coordinator, and I should know this, but I can't follow every team. So, did you guys replace Tim Beck? Who did you find to replace Tim Beck?
We did. We hired Robert Anai from Syracuse.
Okay.
So if you go back and look at Robert Nye's track record, he has a really good coaching tree pedigree he's come up from. But he's when he was at Syracuse last year, you gotta look at a little bit of context. Syracuse the year before that, so 2 years ago, same quarterback, mostly same offensive weapons, particularly the quarterback position. Garrett Schrader was the quarterback at Syracuse 2 years ago. He could not hardly hit the broadside of a barn. Like it was almost like he was throwing lame ducks out there.
Right.
It was kind of pitiful. It's like, this guy, is he real? This is the best quarterback Syracuse can get. I haven't seen a throw this bad. You go into next year, this last season with Robert and his first year at Syracuse there, and Garrett Schrader is like, I can't remember his stats he put up, but he looked like a totally different quarterback, and so that was really impressive by in 1 year to have an OC shift gears like that. With the again, any transition is going to be hard to do. To make someone actually look really good doing it in your first year, it's pretty good. So Garrett Schrader had 2,600 yards. He had a QBR of 68.3, 17 touchdowns. So he wasn't stellar, but when you go back and compare it to the previous year where he had 1,400 yards total on the season,
Right.
he threw 9 touchdowns. I mean, it's
Night and day difference.
huge bump.
Right.
So then you go back to 2021 for Robert and he's at UVA, and Brendan Armstrong's at UVA. That was
Right.
the year that, I mean, same year Devin Leary had a big year, but Brendan Armstrong had 4,400 yards and 40 touchdowns. And
Yeah.
so all I have to say is everywhere along the way Anai's been, he's had success at offense in the Power Fives level. And so State brought him in. And then honestly, I know you didn't ask me this question, but just recently we did, I think it was last week. We got in as a transfer commitment, Brendan Armstrong. He transferred from UVA. It's his last year. He wants to make the most to get to NFL, and so he's going to go back up with Robert and I. And honestly, I think that's really big for NC State, because while you do have an MJ Morris on your roster, who's a true freshman, he'll be a sophomore next year, and Ben Finley, who was the QB4, helped you beat UNC. The other two guys, Devin Leary transferred out, and Jack Chambers graduated. He's done. His eligibility's over with. So what's the quickest way for a team to have success under an OC in the first year? In this case, go get the guy who already knows the system. So, and he's proven it. I mean, like 4,400 yards in 2021 for Brendan Armstrong with Robert Anai as the OC.
Yeah.
I think State fans are optimistic at this point. Maybe we don't have to. Maybe we won't have a big dip on offense. Let's see what Anai can do next year. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. So,
well, let's hope that works out better for you guys than it did for us last year with Graham Harrell and JT Daniels, because that was not. It didn't get. It started out okay, but
and JT Daniels was a big name, right? So
yeah, I mean, he was a 5-star out of high school, one of the most highly recruited kids in the country out of high school, and started at USC as a true freshman, which typically doesn't happen.
Yep.
So there was a lot of injury issues at USC, then at Georgia. Won the starting job at Georgia twice,
right?
But ended up getting hurt. So we were like, this is going to be great if he can just stay healthy. We're in, right? He played great for 3 or 4 games. Our defense wasn't helping him out, is the problem, and we had some other things go wrong. But then as the season progressed, he regressed game after game after game, and ended up getting replaced. Like 3 games before the end of the season. And, we ended up winning 2 of our last 3 without him. So, I don't know what happened, but maybe he just wasn't as great as we thought he was going to be, or maybe he didn't have enough help around him. I don't know whatever it was, it didn't work. But
I hear you on that.
So he's moving on. Graham Harrell's moving on. He's going to Purdue. So,
yeah. I mean, you guys got nice wins against Oklahoma State and Oklahoma and Baylor. Those are all really nice wins. So I mean, there's some advancement there. I know it wasn't a winning season for you guys this past season, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there for the Mountaineers moving forward. So
yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about this coming season, because I got burned last year about being too optimistic. So I'm trying to contain my level of optimism going into the year, but I am cautiously optimistic. I think we're moving in the right direction. It's just Neil Brown's building it slowly over time,
Right.
and us as fans don't like that. We want to see it happen overnight.
Yep.
And it just doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah.
Well, listen, listen, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, man. I know you've got another show to do, but just real quick, once again, let everybody know where to find you.
Yeah, you can find us on YouTube. Tuffy Talk is our name of our podcast, and you can find us on Twitter at Tuffy Talk Now. That's TuffyTalk. And then now, Tuffy Talk Now is the Twitter hashtag, Twitter name, I should say. You can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, a whole host of things. We're broadcasting our show on. So, really looking forward to the future with our podcast, and I really appreciate Coos you let me on and us having an opportunity to talk to you about Devin Carter and what he's going to bring to West Virginia, and Tony Gibson and all that, right, and just a little bit of everything. So it was really fun.
Man. Absolutely. Yeah, anytime we get to say anything positive about Gibby, man, we're on board with it.
Yes, sir. I hear you on that.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you giving my audience the spiel on Carter and kind of filling us in on how things are there in Raleigh with the Wolfpack.
Yep.
And with that being said, man, I'll let you go. So everybody, thanks for tuning into this video, and until the next one, Q Country Roads.